Smart.
Okay.
I want to move on to the first song discussion here.
Yes.
Hate Me If It Helps by Alexander 23.
Classic.
Classic. I have a very distinct memory of when I first heard that song.
Wow.
Came out, it was on New Music Friday, and I mean, I'm a big fan of Alexander 23. I think
Cool.
almost everything he does is incredible. But when I first heard that song, I was really blown away. I don't know, it's my favorite kind of song where it's like crazy dynamics and it just sounds so good. And I knew that Alexander was working with Dan, and Dan usually works with I forget his main mixer guy's name.
Michael.
Yeah, Michael. So I've never met him, so I don't know.
Yeah.
And I just assumed that he was mixing it.
Yeah.
And then I looked and I was like, oh, Yanni mixed it.
Yeah.
And this sounds amazing as usual. So I was like very like stoked to see that. Like,
yeah.
I like being blown away by something that like a friend does.
That's the best.
Yeah.
Totally. And I'm so glad to hear that. That's awesome.
No, I mean that everything you do with Alex like always sounds really great. And I know that's a lot of production as well, but
of course, yeah.
Not taking anything away from him. But the one thing that I really love about that song, and you do it a lot with Alex, is how the vocal is being treated.
Mm-hmm.
It's super upfront and it's dry, but it's not dry.
Mm-hmm.
It always sounds like there's some kind of small verb or slap on there. What's in that song, and just with Alex's voice in general, what's your approach to getting it to be so upfront and present?
Yeah. I mean, for that one, it's probably pretty simple. You know, it probably is just like a short room reverb that they had already printed or something like that, or a slapback.
Right.
I mean, yeah, it's nothing crazy.
Right.
It's the tools that we all have. I think for his vocal, the trick is to make it bright and get nice crispy top end.
Yeah. Without
it getting harsh.
Right. And I think you guys do that really well.
Yeah.
On all of his stuff.
Nice.
What's your, like, is that, I mean, I'm sure you're getting great sounds coming in from him, but what's your approach to kind of tame any harshness that may come from making a vocal bright like that?
Totally. I'll use a de-esser. You know,
that's good old de-esser.
Yeah. I'll boost the top end. So I'll usually use the Isotope Vintage EQ, which is like a Pultec EQ. And I could do the same thing with just any Pultec style EQ, where I'm boosting the top end, like the highest frequency, whatever that is. I think like 16K or something.
I never use that vintage EQ. I gotta start messing with it.
It's a good one, dude.
Everything they make is great, so it's like,
I use that a ton.
Yeah, right, noted.
Yeah, I set the boost to the highest frequency and the highest Q, and I also set the cut to the highest frequency.
Oh.
And it does like a nice little shape where it ducks around 4K. There's a little dip there.
Right.
And then the top end above that just goes like almost parabolic.
Wow.
Goes way up. So you're getting a lot of 7K and up, just like skyrocketed.
Right.
But right below that, around 4K, it's smoothed out a little bit.
Right.
And you kind of finesse this shape by tweaking the cut and tweaking the Q factor. And you kind of just play with those three. There's only 3 knobs you got to touch there.
Right.
And that creates a really nice, smooth top end boost. And then after that, I'll use a de-esser or something like that.
Right.
And for that, I like to use the Pro C2.
Okay.
Except I just use the sidechain filter that's built in.
Okay.
Filter out up until 10K ish, and maybe use one of the bell, because there's like that little EQ section below.
Yeah.
And I'll find like where is it most pointy, and just bump it right there. And highest ratio.
Yeah.
Fastest attack, fastest release. Set to clean mode, I think it is.
Okay.
And look ahead on as well.
Yeah.
So that's the money de-esser setting right there.
That's a really interesting technique.
Yeah.
Is that something that someone showed you, or kind of like just stumbled upon yourself by like?
I've just stumbled upon it.
Yeah.
I use Pro C2 so much that I want to use that plugin for like everything.
Yeah.
Because I know it so well.
Right.
So I can get better results with Pro C2 than the de-esser plugin, for example, just because I know how Pro C2 works and how it functions and how like all the different modes react, and it's the cleanest one for me.
Yeah.
By a long shot.
Yeah. That's smart. It's like, that's the other thing too. It's like, I mean, you know me, I'm like plugin addicted.
Yeah.
But I mostly like that for creative purposes, where like I get new plugins that inspires me to like. I like not knowing what I'm doing when I'm creating.
Yeah.
And you can only really get that with like a new toy.
That's so true.
Where I'm like, I don't know what this does. Like, I don't know. Let's see what happens.
For knobs, it sounds cool.
But I will say, like, when I'm mixing, you know, or like doing my rough mix, it's like I'm using tools that I'm very familiar with.
Yeah.
Just because, like, okay, I know what this does. I don't want to do anything crazy.
Yeah, exactly. I'm the same way too.
Yeah.
Like, I'm using 3-4 plugins constantly.
Yeah.
And I just know them really well.
It's smart. I mean, let's like learn what you have, guys. It's really important. Another thing that you always do well, but especially well in this song, are acoustic guitars. So what you have any, I don't know if for that song in particular, but do you have any tricks that you use? Or the one that I always like to ask about acoustic guitars is, are you compressing them or are you using any specific EQ on it?
I feel like acoustic guitars are so dependent on the recording.
Right.
Like, if it's recorded well, then you don't need much. And I know for sure that song, the acoustics were recorded very well.
Yeah.
So they probably didn't take much.
Yeah.
But on a typical acoustic guitar, I would, my instinct isn't necessarily to compress them. Maybe a little bit with the Pro C2, fastest attack, fastest release, limiter, basically, highest ratio. Look ahead on.
Right, just to catch anything.
Catch like the super spiky stuff.
Yeah.
That like you can see as in the waveform, like that's just going to kill your headroom. So I'm like, let's just knock that out. Or I would use a clipper plugin, like the standard clip, to just shave off those crazy transients. But I'm not necessarily like looking for a compressed
acoustic
guitar. Because I kind of want it to sound natural and spacious.
Yeah.
I think it's a lot about EQ. So it's like, it's cutting the low end if it's boomy,
right?
Which a lot of the times it is. And for that, I'll use like a shelf, Pro Q3. Just
there you go.
Shelf down like around 100 hertz, maybe a little bit above that. Sometimes it's not there. It's like a little bit above 100 hertz. Like you leave the low stuff kind of alone, but you do a little cut around like 130 or something.
Right.
And I hate giving like specific numbers because it's always different. But you know
the general thing, it's like I think things like this, you know, when you see all like the clips on Instagram and TikTok where it's like great tips.
Yeah.
Use it as a guide.
Yes.
It's never a hard and fast rule. It's like, it's a good like start there.
Yeah.
And then like move things around and then start using your ears. You know?
Exactly. And like a lot of the times it does work. Like it's close to working. So it is a good starting point.
Yeah.
I also really like Saturn. I use that a ton.
Yeah.
And for that, I'm doing a very specific thing where I'm creating a band of just the mids, like as narrow as I can get it.
Right.
Probably like a 12 dB slope on those filters. And I am just compressing with that little compress knob on Saturn and doing some drive just in the mids. And I'm talking like between 500 and a K, 1K.
The sweet spot.
That's the sweet spot. Yeah. So I'll move it around there a little bit and find a spot where it really just like, it comes through nice. It's nice and woody and warm and in your face, but like not harsh, because the harshness comes higher than that. It's like 1K and up, that gets a little harsh. So I'll find that like nice warmth in that frequency area, and I'll use Saturn to
bring it up there. I love Saturn.
Yeah,
such that, and like I mean, you know, I really like it, but I really like Spectre too.
Totally.
They're like a little bit different, but like when you want the different flavors,
the
different things that they do, it's fun to have.
I like Spectre
options.
To getting stuff to poke out a little bit.
Yeah,
like it goes a long way, just like a 1 dB or 2 dB.
Oh, it's crazy.
Move on Spectre, and like all of a sudden it's just like poking out really nicely.
The tiniest little moves on that guy does so much. It's kind of insane. Last thing I want to talk about that is that really incredible breakdown part where it's like,
of course.
So again, I'm sure a lot of that was production choices, but on your end, did you have any trouble? You know, it's not super clipped and limited. It still sounds really musical, but it's really powerful. Did you have any trouble when you were mixing that, or like trying to get it loud but not crazy?
that's definitely like the thing that was going through my head.
Yeah.
You know, how do I get these parts, these like really in your face loud sections to like be super loud and jump out at you, while also like making sure the overall volume was nice and loud.
Yeah.
So it was like, how do I get something loud to be louder and then less loud? It's like we're reaching a ceiling at a certain point. And so I think for that one, it's a matter of like making sure the verses are kind of quiet so that you have some space to jump up from the verses. And again, it is a lot of instrumentation because those sections, that's when the live drums come in, the crashes, like tons of guitar layers come in. And I think I'm like boosting a ton of top end on guitars and the cymbals, just creating like, because there's a difference in volume,
right? But
you also want to create a contrast in tonal stuff, so it's like kind of warm and dark-ish in the verses, and then in the hits, it's super bright.
Yeah, track comes alive at that moment.
Yeah, it's really, like a perceived loudness, and so ton of top end.
I mean, that's it. It's like introducing different EQ sections and not solely relying on, because I was like, I wanted to think it was like super limited in clip, but that's really not what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
I'm hearing kind of exactly what you're describing because you did it.
Nice. Yeah. I'm sure there is some clipping in there too.
No, obviously.
You know,
but it doesn't seem like it's like, you know what, it reminded me of the big Billie Eilish song where, the last song on the record where it gets crazy at the end and they're like really clipping like on purpose
stylistically.
So that's what I thought it was at first, but then I was like, oh no, it's not, they're not doing the same thing.